This is a continuation of my personal spiritual journey. You could call it my testimony, I guess. And this is the third part. And if you haven't seen part 1 and part 2, you may want to go and watch those, just because this probably won't make any sense and otherwise. So I finished up the last installment. I was at a bit of a crisis point in my spiritual journey. I had come to a place of being somewhat divided within myself. I was becoming more and more persuaded at an intellectual level of the truth of what we could call the small c Catholic view of salvation and the church and the grace of God and what it means to believe and to receive God's grace. And I had been praying for quite a number of years with the Book of Common Prayer, and I detailed that in my last installment. So the upshot of that was that I found myself growing further and further away from both the theological tenets and the public worship of the denomination and the particular church that I was attending. And it was not a sustainable way to live your life, really. You need to have things. The way you pray is the way you believe. That should be the way it is, and the way you worship. It all kind of has to tie together, or things are going to come unraveled. And I realized this at one point, and I was in a bit of a crisis, not sure what to do. And I was having difficulties teaching the adult Bible Sunday school class that I wasn't the only teacher. We were on a rotating basis, so I taught when it was my turn to come up in the rotation, and I was assigned a curriculum. We didn't choose the topics. I couldn't just make stuff up. I was assigned a topic, and the curriculum was assigned to me. I just had to present, do my due diligence, present the material, get a presentation together, and it was stand behind a podium and lecture for approximately 45 minutes on whatever that subject was. And so I was having trouble reconciling more and more what I was personally learning in my own private devotional life and my own private study with what I was given to present to the class. And this went on for the better part of a year, and I was in quite a lot of spiritual, I wouldn't say anguish, but I was concerned just how I was going to handle this this seeming discrepancy. And so during that time, two things were coming into my life which I wasn't really planning on or expecting. I was felt called to commit my life to to God in a deeper way. And I was a single guy, and by this time I was almost 30, and I had, I had dated some young ladies, and had um, never really had my heart into it, I guess you could say. It was always, how good, kindly old people in church would say, well, you should go out with so and so, or you should, ask so and so out, or it was the thing to do, carry on the family name, do this, do that, the other. And I was not very successful. I'm not very good looking, and I wasn't very good at interpersonal chitter chatter with juvenile females. And the older I got, all the ones, that, like they say, the older you get, the harder it gets, because the good ones all get snagged and taken up. But so I got to thinking, by this time I was reading a lot of Anglican writers, and I realized that there were Anglican religious orders, and I actually explored a vocation with an Anglican third order, not a full, living in a monastery, but a third order. I won't go into the details in the exact name, but it was based on the Rule of St. Benedict. And by this time I had read the Rule of St. Benedict, and I'm thinking in my mind, why don't I just discern with this order? I'll be a third order, and see what happens. You essentially you live your life in the world, but you have specific things you're obliged to do. You have to pray the daily offices, and be engaged in some sort of ministry, and very various things. They had a rule, and you just needed to follow the rule. And so I actually was a postulant, and then a novice, and then became a third order. And this went on for probably, I'm going to say, 4 or 5 years, even after some other events in my life. And eventually I left that, and I'll detail that when I get to it. But the other thing that happened during this while was I just happened to be reading, this was on the internet one day. I'd been studying Catholic authors, and I had been reading a little bit about the Blessed Virgin Mary, and I started to search around for more information on the Blessed Virgin Mary, because it seemed like a major theme in Catholic theology, and I was getting conflicting messages in the Anglican writers that I was reading. Some of them would say one thing, and some of them would say another thing. So I thought, I'm gonna do more research into this whole subject of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and what's the approach that's most correct, or whatever. And so by chance I happened upon the apostolate of the late Father Nicholas Gruner, which is the Fatima Center promoting the message of Fatima, amongst many other things. And I began reading, and I actually ordered some of the publications that they published, and I was just struck and fascinated by this whole subject. And I really had devoured book after book after book about this subject, and in the process of doing all this reading, just thousands of pages, I came to the conclusion, but along this time I had also been reading, and prior to, I had been reading other books, like the Glories of Mary by St. Alphonsus Liguori. I had been reading that even before this other just trying to get a sense of this. And I was, it's like looking at glossy magazine pictures. You start to be drawn to this this attractive feature, and it was like kind of like falling in love. You can't really explain it, but you're just reading this, and all of a sudden, one day you realize that, wow, like this stuff is like the real deal. So, and this is all, of course, while I'm still attending and speaking publicly at a Pentecostal church. I'm a closet praying my rosary and praying the Anglican daily offices. And can you see a problem coming down the line where things are going to reach a crunch point? So it does reach a crunch point, and fortunately at the time there was a small continuing Anglican parish, and it was a part of what at the time was called the Anglican Catholic Church of Canada, and that was itself a part of the worldwide traditional Anglican communion. And if you want to go and Google all that up, I'm sure, I haven't Googled it in many, many years, but I'm sure they may still have websites if they're still operational. I'm not sure. But I telephoned the priest who was listed on the website, and he called me, and I can't remember why. I must have left a message, and he called me, and we had a good conversation, and I kind of explained to him my situation, and in the end, he invited me to come and visit his parish, and I did so. And that was the first time in my life I'd ever, of my own free choice, had not gone to my own denomination on a Sunday morning. I turned the other way and drove to another church, and I went there, and it was very much what I had come to expect, because I'd read the prayer book, had been praying out of the prayer book for a number of years, and the language was familiar, and I was, when you read a book for 3 or 4 years, you learn some of the rubrics without even it just sort of automatically comes to you. You don't really think. So there were a few things that were a little strange, but at the end of the day, I went there 2 or 3 times, not in a row, but 2 or 3 times I went, and finally I made the decision that I said, this is what I have to do to be consistent within myself. I need to worship the way I believe and pray the way I believe, and so that things all line up. So I did that. I taught my last Protestant Pentecostal Sunday school lesson one Sunday morning, and then and funnily enough, I didn't choose the topic. The topic was assigned to me, and the topic was divine healing, and how divine healing was a part of the atonement, and Jesus died. By his stripes we were healed, and that Jesus promises, divine healing, miraculous healing if we only believe. This is sort of, if you have enough faith, you'll be healed. And that was the assigned topic. Well, I taught a lesson on redemptive suffering. And I quoted the Catechism of the Catholic Church and a bunch of other authors, and based it all on Scripture. And I was actually, about a year ago, I was rereading through, because I kept all my notes. I still have all my notes from all the lessons, and you can see the progression of my lesson. I call them, they're not really sermons, they're lectures. But you can see the progression from when I began, from first to the last. And and at the end of the lesson, I announced that this would be my last time teaching, and that I was going to be resigning as one of the Sunday school teachers, and that I would actually be going to a new church. And there were some harsh responses from certain members, and that I expected that, and so that was that. I had to resign from the board of directors, the church board, and resign my position as the head usher. And so you get tied into something, and it takes a while to disentangle, but I sort of mentally prepared. And so I cut the cord loose, and that was that. And it was hard to do. By this time, I'm, in my early 30s. I'm no longer a teenager or a kid. So I became an Anglican, a traditional Anglican of the Catholic bent. The Anglican Catholic Church of Canada. Essentially, they believed what Catholics believed, but we weren't under the authority of the Pope. That was the upshot of it all. So there I was, no longer a Pentecostal, I was an Anglican. So I was involved with that small Anglican parish for about 5 years. I was confirmed there, and I was involved in the music part of the parish. They didn't have anybody to play the keyboard. They didn't have an organ, but I had a keyboard, and I could, I'm not a very good musician, but I could, stumble my way through the service music and some of the hymns. And so I actually provided some of the music, and then I was licensed as what they call a lay reader. If you're Anglican, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so things went on, and I was quite content for the most part in that parish. And then I believe it was 2009, possibly 2009, there was a motu proprio published by Pope Benedict XVI called Anglicanorum Cetibus, which is, groups of Anglicans. And so what this motu proprio was saying, in effect, was it was an invitation for groups of Anglicans, essentially, parishes, parish groupings, who were wanting to end the schism of the Reformation and come back into communion with the See of Rome and the Catholic Church. That they were welcome to do so, if they were prepared to, make a profession of Catholic faith and so forth and so forth. And I'm thinking to myself, this is great, because, like in my heart of hearts, that's where I wanted to be, was in the Catholic, squarely in the heart of the Catholic Church, believing the Catholic faith with all the, all the rest of the saints all through the ages. And so, unfortunately, my parish priest was not on the same page, and he let it be known that we wouldn't be, even if the rest of the parishes in the church went in, we wouldn't be doing that. So this threw me into another little bit of a crisis here, thinking, how can I in good conscience claimed to be Catholic, and then turned down an invitation to enter into communion with the Catholic Church. And so I was quite distressed at a personal level. That was one source of distress. And the other source of distress was the third order religious order that I was a member of was in the process of disintegrating due to a crisis in leadership. And unfortunately, in the Anglican world, this is an Anglican religious order, it wasn't a Catholic one, it was an Anglican, continuing Anglican religious order. There was a crisis in the leadership, and over the course of quite a while, things fell apart. So I didn't consciously leave the order. It simply just fell apart and no longer existed. And so I still have my my habit. It's in a box, like I never officially quit or resigned. The order just ceased. It just faltered and failed and died. It no longer exists. I did give I had a cross that I wore, and there was one gentleman in our parish who was very, very ill, and he always admired the cross that I had worn. It was part of my habit that we would wear the habit at liturgical celebrations. So when I went to church, I would wear my habit, and it was, I won't describe it, but it looked very monk-like. So when the order had kind of failed and died, and this other gentleman was quite ill, he had cancer, and I gave him the cross, and I said, "Here, I just want you to have this," and he was very grateful. And I learned he passed away not too many years after that, maybe not even a year after. He was quite ill. So, but anyhow, getting back to Anglicanorum Cedibus, I was wanting to do some soul searching about this, and I thought this is a moment in my life where this matters, and I have to decide what I'm going to do. So I decided to try to make a retreat. Now, I had been on self-guided retreats before. I actually went to a Benedictine monastery in New York. I won't give the name. And I'd spent the week there, just a self-guided retreat, just doing some reading and participating in the prayers of the monks. But it was so different because it was the post-Vatican II liturgy of the hours and the new post-Vatican II order liturgy of the Mass, and I was used to the traditional Anglican. Like I could understand everything they were doing because it was all in English, but it was just a world apart from the liturgy that I had come to know, basically by heart. The Anglican rite of the Holy Eucharist and the prayers of the offices. It was just so different. But anyhow, I decided I'm going to make not a retreat that was a guided retreat, by like experienced clergy who give retreats type of thing. So I went and started looking around online, and I got thinking to myself, I'd really like to try an Ignatian retreat. A real, not, 30-day one or anything, but I'd really like to make an Ignatian retreat. And I found that, time was of the essence here. So there was an Ignatian retreat being run in Shawinigan, Quebec by the Society of St. Pius X. Now, I had some misgivings about the Society of St. Pius X. I'd heard all kinds of, things about them, good and bad and otherwise, but I thought, well, an Ignatian retreat is an Ignatian retreat, and it's what God thinks that matters. And so I wanted to give this a try. So I actually signed up. I emailed the organizing the organizer part, to register. I said, I'm an Anglican. I said, can I come to this retreat? And he said, oh, absolutely. We welcome anybody who wants to come. So okay, good. I want to sign up. I want to come, and I explained to him what was up, like with the other. So anyways, I went to this retreat, and that would have been in early 2010, I'm gonna say. I went to this retreat, and on that retreat, it was very powerful. It was my first exposure in person to the traditional Latin rite of Mass. It was my first exposure to that sort of teaching, like the conferences and the talks that the priests would give, and even just the fellowship with the other retreatants. We weren't allowed to talk much, but we did talk a little bit. And just living in community, and in eating, in the refectory. And it was very fruitful, and I found myself coming out of that retreat very certain of what I had to do. There was no way I could refuse to become Catholic even if my priest decided against it. My loyalty and my love was for the Lord and for His church, and I wanted to follow Him and serve Him wherever He led. I didn't want to be picking and choosing and saying, well, I'm going to be this much of a Christian, but beyond that I won't go. So the decision was taken. I told my parish priest of what I was wanting to do, and he tried to persuade me otherwise, and I just couldn't see any other option at that moment in time. And so what I did was I went to the nearest Roman Catholic church to me and inquired as to convert classes or whatnot. And they said, oh, you're just in time. We're just starting now for anyone who wants to be received into the church. They do it twice a year, once at sort of in Advent and then once at Easter. And it's usually a bigger group at the Easter group. It's a little more hoopla, but they have a bunch of people who come in, and I will say that most of the people who are coming into the church are coming in because they're marrying someone who's, so they're not, I tried to say this with charity, they're coming into the church and they're going through convert classes because it's sort of like it's something they have to check off the list. And so, but of course, that's not to doubt their sincerity or their faith or their piety or anything. I don't say that. But the class was very low key. It was taught by the priest himself, and okay, so I'm continuing on. I ran out of memory room on my recording device here. Let's get myself organized here. So continuing on, I signed up for what they called convert classes, and they were taught by the priest, and we would meet one evening per week, and there was 4 or 5 of us there, and I had to find a sponsor and this and that, and I began attending Mass at the parish, and I won't name the parish, but it was a fairly traditional looking church, but they used the standard post-Vatican II liturgical books. And there were things about it that were um, diametrically opposite, really, of what had been taught in the Anglican Catholic Church. But I thought, you know what, this is the deal. We're just gonna do this, and trust God to work it all out. He's the one who's leading and guiding and in control of things. I had spent enough time trying to run my own life and made a mess of things, so let's just go with God here. So I did, and I was actually received into the Roman Catholic Church on December 18th, 2011. It was at an evening mass, and we were all lined up together, all of us who were coming into the church at that time. It was fairly low key, but it was nice. It was good, and so that's it. I was received into the church in Advent of 2011. So once I was into the church, no, I was in. So I attended there for every Sunday, as faithfully as I could. Actually, I tended to go on Saturday nights because my day job at the time required me to work. I only got every third weekend off, and I was actually the days I could go to the Saturday evening mass because I'd be home from work then, and I could go, and if I had to work Sunday, then I wouldn't have to miss mass. So actually, the Saturday night masses or evening masses are excellent for people who are forced by this modern world that we live in, who have to work. So I found the Novus Ordo liturgical life extremely challenging, and I found myself drifting back into the feelings and the thoughts and the emotions that I had felt. By this time, it's going back, 5 or 6 years when I was still in the Protestant world, trying to worship in a Pentecostal church. And I'll be the first to admit that I am not a perfect person. I am the chief of sinners, and I do not claim to stand in judgment of any other person, any other parish, any other denomination. I am not their judge. I'm just telling you my feelings and my reactions and my thoughts to things that I experienced in my life, in my spiritual journey. That's what this is about. I'm not an expert on the larger picture of things. I'm just telling you what I experienced in my life. And so I struggled quite a bit trying to wrap my mind around this new, different way of worshiping as a Catholic. And there were times when I received somewhat what we would call consolations, and I think there's a lot to be said for that form of the liturgy, and I think there are many people who are appreciative of it. But I myself, I just struggled the whole time, and partway through the first year, the diocese introduced a new musical settings for the Mass, and I swear it was it was composed by someone who composed the music for cartoon shows. It was horrendous music. It was just awful. And I would just cringe when they tried to introduce it. They printed out music sheets and put them in the pews. Nobody was singing along with it. It was just the lamest attempt to introduce musical settings to a parish. So I struggled on for about a year and a half, and finally I made the decision to visit a parish that I had visited before. Actually, it at one time was a parish of the Anglican Catholic Church of Canada, and I had been there a couple of times when I was, parishes would get together and do things, and it was a couple of hours away in another city, and I decided to try to make the trek up there. Now they only had it was only a Sunday morning, so I could only go every third week, basically. Plus, they had the odd weekday mass, but it was early in the morning, and I worked every day and all that stuff. So, but I began attending the ordinariate parish as often as I could, and sadly, that parish no longer exists. It closed down a couple of years ago. But I actually made the decision. This is, I guess, how seriously I was taking my faith at the time. I made the decision to move closer so I could be closer to that parish, so that I could go to Mass every single Sunday, and that it would be less of a drive. And so I moved. Instead of it being, an hour and a half, it was now only, 45 minutes. Not out of line at all. And so I did that. I sold the house I was living this time. My parents had sold our farm, and I had to move away. And so I sold the house that I was living in, and I purchased up closer to the Anglican Ordinariate parish, so I could go. And that I thought, this is good. This is what we want. So I'm going to leave it there for now. This video has run on a lot longer than I expected. So I've become full-fledged Latin Rite Roman Catholic with a traditional Anglican formation, I guess you could say, and I'm attending, I guess you could say I'm by ritual. When I was at home, I was trying to go to Mass every week like I'm supposed to. I would go to the Saturday evening Novus Ordo liturgy, the 2 weeks when I had to work, and then the Sunday I was off, I would drive up to the Anglican Ordinariate parish and for the Sunday morning Mass. And the other special days, they had special other days. They had a lot of traditional things that they did, especially around Easter time, Christmas time, and all of that. So I'll leave it at that for now, and there should be one more installment, and I'll pick up from there, because unfortunately I fall off the edge of the cliff in the next installment.